March 23, 1944, Camp Hearne, Texas. Corporal Friedrich Werner of the Afrika Korps sat frozen in a makeshift theatre, his weathered hands gripping the wooden bench as light flickered across a bedsheet stretched between two poles. The projector hummed, casting images that defied everything he believed. American soldiers were singing, dancing with beautiful women, driving automobiles through cities untouched by bombs. Jazz rhythms filled the dusty barracks, melodies the Reich called degenerate, yet they stirred something deep within him. When Bing Crosby's priest character embraced a wayward youth at the film's end, applause erupted from 300 German prisoners around him. Werner remained silent, transfixed. These Americans weren't the materialistic barbarians of Nazi propaganda. They were human, compassionate, creative. The film was going my way, and this screening in a Texas prison camp would haunt Werner for decades. The moment he realized the Third Reich had lied about everything. Across the American POW camp system, approximately 425,000 German military personnel would witness Hollywood's golden age from behind barbed wire. They discovered a nation where assembly line workers watched the same films as admirals, where stories celebrated individual triumph over systems, where ordinary citizens became heroes through character rather than bloodline. These encounters with American cinema would demolish the spiritual foundations of Nazi ideology more thoroughly than any battlefield defeat. The mathematics of cultural transformation were calculated in frames per second, and hearts changed. While German soldiers had endured years of UFA propaganda films glorifying racial superiority, American camps showed 3 features weekly, regardless of content. While the Wehrmacht had banned American movies since 1941, POWs now had unlimited access to Hollywood's creativity. While Goebbels declared cinema a weapon for Völkisch education, prisoners discovered entertainment that asked nothing but emotional engagement. The transformation began the moment German captives encountered American film culture. Lieutenant Hans Müller, engineer for Rommel's desert forces, documented his first screening aboard a Liberty ship headed for Virginia in July 1943. The Americans led us into the ship's mess. A sailor was threading film through a projector as casually as dealing cards. The movie started, a musical called Yankee Doodle Dandy. James Cagney danced with explosive energy, celebrating American history without martial grandeur. Our guards watched beside us, sharing chocolate bars. When Cagney performed "You're a Grand Old Flag," the entire room sang along. We sat mute, but inside, certainties were crumbling. This democratic approach to entertainment, while U-boats still hunted Allied shipping, revealed American confidence beyond propaganda. The Provost Marshal General's records confirm that by late 1944, the POW camp system operated 511 separate movie venues, showing films to German prisoners. Programs ran 7 nights per week in larger camps, musicals on Mondays, westerns on Wednesdays, comedies for Saturday nights, even Disney cartoons on Sunday afternoons. The shock deepened when German prisoners discovered the egalitarian nature of American film distribution. Private Carl Schmidt, captured in Sicily and held at Camp Butner, North Carolina, wrote home in coded letters. Here, the camp commander watches films with enlisted men. The same movie for generals and grenadiers. Even Negro soldiers attend screenings with whites. They vote on which films to show next week. The mess sergeant counts raised hands like it's an election. This is their democracy, choosing between Clark Gable and Gary Cooper. The camp theatre facilities stunned prisoners accustomed to wartime scarcity. Real projection equipment salvaged from closed civilian cinemas, genuine theatre seats arranged in rows, concession stands where prisoners could purchase popcorn with camp scrip. At Camp Concordia, Kansas, POWs constructed a 500-seat theatre complete with a stage, inspired by the musicals they watched. German projectionists, trusted with expensive equipment despite being enemies, ran the shows with professional pride. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm Hartmann, captured at Kasserine Pass, spent 2 years at Camp Carson, Colorado. His unpublished memoir describes the psychological impact. The Americans showed us films while their soldiers died in Europe and the Pacific. Not propaganda about noble sacrifice, but entertainment, comedies, romances, adventures. Fred Astaire dancing while bombs fell. Judy Garland singing while submarines sank convoys. This abundance of spirit during catastrophe revealed their true strength. We Germans made war. Americans made movies about everything except war. The variety of genres overwhelmed prisoners limited to approved Nazi productions. They discovered screwball comedies where ordinary people mocked authority, film noirs where justice was questioned, westerns celebrating individual freedom over collective obedience. Each genre violated some principle of totalitarian culture. Prisoners watched the Marx Brothers demolish social hierarchies through humor, something unthinkable in the Third Reich. They saw Humphrey Bogart choose personal honor over political loyalty in Casablanca. They witnessed John Wayne defending individual rights against mob rule. Technical Sergeant Franz Kellner, former projectionist at Bavaria Film Studios, operated projectors at Camp Carson from 1943 to 1946. His detailed logs, discovered decades later, reveal the transformation. I showed Casablanca 53 times by prisoner request. Each screening, more men understood, Rick wasn't propaganda about noble sacrifice, but art about free choice. He helped the resistance because he chose to, not from duty to state or race. Bogart's cynicism masked idealism. This complexity was forbidden in German cinema. We had burned such nuanced films. Americans trusted enemies to understand subtlety. The power of Hollywood musicals proved particularly subversive to Nazi ideology. Soldiers trained to march in formation watched Fred Astaire transform military precision into artistic expression. Men who'd sung only approved Volkslieder discovered Irving Berlin melodies that crossed all boundaries. At Camp Hearne, Texas, German POWs formed a theatrical troupe performing translated versions of Broadway musicals they'd seen on screen. Their production of 42nd Street in German drew American guards as audience members. Captain Ernst Zimmermann, Luftwaffe fighter pilot shot down over Sicily, wrote extensively to his wife from Camp Shanks, New York. His letters, preserved in family archives, document the emotional impact. Last night they showed The Wizard of Oz, in color beyond imagination. Dorothy singing of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, while we had dropped bombs on London. The film was made in 1939 as we invaded Poland. While we prepared for conquest, Americans created dreams in Technicolor. Every man in the theater, guards and prisoners, had tears during Over the Rainbow. Even the SS men couldn't hide their emotions. How do you return to Germany and pretend such beauty doesn't exist? The star system introduced German soldiers to fame earned through talent rather than party connections. Unlike German film stars who served state propaganda, Hollywood celebrities were beloved for personality and skill. POWs developed passionate loyalties, decorating barracks with Betty Grable pin-ups, debating whether Cary Grant or James Stewart better embodied American masculinity, forming fan clubs for actresses like Katharine Hepburn, who portrayed strong, independent women. At Camp Rupert, Idaho, the German POW newspaper featured a weekly column reviewing Hollywood films. Former Berlin film student Helmut Weiss wrote sophisticated criticism. We argue about movies like Free Men Debate Ideas. Is John Ford's vision of community authentic or mythological? Does Frank Capra's optimism reflect American reality or American aspirations? These discussions teach democracy. Having opinions, defending them with evidence, accepting disagreement. In the Reich, the state dictated our responses to culture. Here, we discover our own thoughts. The emotional impact of romantic comedies and women's pictures proved especially powerful. Nazi cinema had relegated women to mothers and maidens, supporting male heroes. Hollywood showed women as equals, professionals, decision-makers. German soldiers watched Rosalind Russell running newspapers, Bette Davis managing businesses, Joan Crawford choosing careers over marriage. These portrayals contradicted everything about proper German womanhood. Sergeant Otto Hartmann, an SS officer captured in France, underwent complete ideological transformation through film. Held at Camp Gordon, Georgia, he later testified at denazification proceedings. The American films showed racial mixing as normal, even positive. Musicals with black performers like Bill Robinson dancing with white children. Jewish comedians like the Marx Brothers mocking authority figures we'd been taught to revere. Women choosing their own paths. After 2 years of such films, Nazi racial theory seemed absurd. I requested to see Casablanca repeatedly, a film celebrating resistance to Nazis, shown to Nazi prisoners who ended up cheering for Rick. Christmas 1944 brought emotional breakthrough through holiday films. While the Battle of the Bulge raged, while German cities burned under Allied bombs, American camps organized Christmas film festivals. POWs watched Holiday Inn and Going My Way, experiencing American celebration amid global war. Prisoners received candy during screenings, sang carols with guards, wept openly at Bing Crosby's White Christmas. Private Joseph Wagner, imprisoned at Camp Polk, Louisiana, kept a diary hidden in his mattress. December 25, 1944. The Americans showed Christmas films continuously. We who were losing everything watched American joy. Bing Crosby singing of home while our homes were rubble. Children celebrating around trees while German children huddled in bomb shelters. Yet they included us, their enemies, in their holiday. We sang Silent Night together, guards and prisoners, victors and vanquished. I understood then that we could never defeat people who maintained such humanity during war. The projection equipment itself became symbolic of American industrial abundance. While Germany struggled to maintain basic film production, American camps had multiple projectors, replacement bulbs, endless reels of film. Prisoners watched movies filmed during wartime showing no shortage of materials, talent, or creativity. Technicolor musicals produced while America fought on 2 fronts, elaborate period pieces created while factories produced bombers. This casual display of surplus resources during total war shattered German assumptions about American decadence, leading to weakness. Major Kurt Richter, senior German officer at Camp Blanding, Florida, organized weekly discussion groups after screenings. His secret notes, discovered after repatriation, document the ideological impact. The men cannot reconcile American films with Nazi teachings. They've seen too much evidence of American strength through culture. Every Hollywood film showing government officials as comic figures, yet America grows stronger. Every movie celebrating individual choice over collective obedience, yet American unity increases. The films teach that questioning authority strengthens democracy. How do we return to blind obedience after learning to think? Western films particularly influenced German military thinking about honor and law. Wehrmacht officers trained in strict hierarchy watched Gary Cooper in High Noon, choosing personal conscience over community pressure. They saw John Wayne defending law through individual action rather than state power. These lone heroes making moral choices without orders contradicted Prussian military tradition of absolute obedience. Lieutenant Wilhelm Drescher, paratrooper captured in Italy, wrote extensive analyses of American westerns from Camp Atterbury, Indiana. The cowboy represents American democracy, individual freedom balanced with community responsibility, not taking orders but making choices. The sheriff upholds law through moral authority, not state power. Even villains have reasons, not just evil nature. This complexity was forbidden in our films. Every Western teaches that legitimate authority comes from below, not above. Revolutionary ideas dressed as entertainment. The film noir genre introduced moral ambiguity that Nazi cinema had eliminated. German soldiers watched protagonists who weren't purely good, villains with sympathetic motives, authorities who were corrupt, endings that weren't happy. These dark stories paradoxically demonstrated American confidence, a society secure enough to examine its own shadows. Prisoners discovered that admitting imperfection could be strength, not weakness. Corporal Hans Becker, military policeman captured at Anzio, spent hours analyzing film noir from Camp McCain, Mississippi. American crime films show police as fallible, government as corruptible, justice as uncertain. In Germany, such films would be treason. Yet Americans watch their own failures on screen and grow stronger. Double Indemnity shows greed and murder, yet teaches that crime doesn't pay. The Maltese Falcon reveals everyone lies, yet truth survives. They trust audiences to understand complexity. We were given simple propaganda. They give their people complicated art. The presence of European refugees in Hollywood films delivered powerful messages about American acceptance. German soldiers watched films directed by William Wyler, born in France, starring Hedy Lamarr, fled Austria, written by Billy Wilder, escaped Berlin. These artists who'd fled Nazi persecution now created American culture. Their success demonstrated that America gained strength by welcoming refugees rather than maintaining racial purity. Private Ernst Mueller, captured in North Africa, wrote from Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. Half of Hollywood seems to be Europeans who escaped Hitler. They make films celebrating America, while we who stayed fight for the Reich. Marlene Dietrich, our greatest star, makes American movies while we suffer. These refugees didn't weaken America, they strengthened it. Every film by foreign-born directors proves our racial theories wrong. Talent matters more than bloodline in democracy. The documentary and newsreel programs shown between features provided context that amplified Hollywood's impact. POWs watched American factories producing Liberty ships in days, farms feeding the world, cities untouched by war building for peace. These images of abundance contrasted sharply with German newsreels showing only destruction and sacrifice. Prisoners realized America fought from surplus, while Germany fought from desperation. Sergeant Friedrich Wenzel, logistics expert imprisoned at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, analyzed American production capabilities through film. Their newsreels show factories making refrigerators during wartime, workers taking vacations while building bombers, children in schools instead of factories. Every documentary reveals abundance we couldn't imagine. They make movies about normal life while fighting globally. We couldn't make bread, they make entertainment. This casual display of surplus explains our defeat better than any battle. The camp newspaper reviews written by POWs reveal sophisticated understanding of American values through cinema. At Camp Hearne, Texas, former journalist Otto Steinberg published weekly criticism that demonstrated complete ideological transformation. This week's film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, shows one man fighting corrupt government. In Germany, this would be impossible. The individual cannot challenge the system. Yet Stewart's character wins through persistence and truth. The film teaches that democracy's strength lies in allowing criticism. Every American movie showing government failure actually demonstrates government success. Secure systems allow dissent. By spring 1945, German prisoners had absorbed hundreds of Hollywood films spanning every genre. They'd experienced musicals filmed while America buried soldiers, comedies created during crisis, love stories ignoring war entirely. This ability to maintain normal cultural production during global conflict revealed reserves of strength beyond military power. Lieutenant Colonel Hans Richter, senior officer at Camp Concordia, Kansas, compiled lists of films that most influenced prisoners. It Happened One Night taught that class barriers could fall through love. The Grapes of Wrath showed government helping desperate citizens rather than exploiting them. Citizen Kane revealed that wealth without humanity means nothing, How Green Was My Valley demonstrated that family matters more than ideology. Every film carried democratic messages more powerful than any propaganda. The mandatory screening of concentration camp footage in April and May 1945 gained devastating power because prisoners had spent years watching Hollywood's America. After experiencing 2 years of American films celebrating diversity and inclusion, the revelation of Nazi death camps shattered remaining loyalty to the Reich. The contrast between Hollywood's multicultural democracy and Germany's genocidal reality was unbearable. At Camp Butner, North Carolina, the reaction was volcanic. After watching British footage of Bergen-Belsen liberation, over 1,000 German POWs spontaneously burned their Wehrmacht uniforms in a massive bonfire. They had spent years watching an America that included everyone. Now they saw what their own exclusionary ideology had created. Colonel Friedrich Steinberg, senior German officer at Camp Hearne, Texas, described the psychological collapse. For 2 years we watched American films showing Jews as heroes, blacks as artists, immigrants as patriots. We dismissed it as propaganda. Then we saw our concentration camps. The Americans hadn't lied about their inclusiveness. We had lied about our superiority. The films prepared us to understand the horror of what we'd done. Mickey Rooney dancing with Judy Garland while we murdered children. How do you reconcile such evil with such innocence? The repatriation beginning in late 1945 sent home German soldiers transformed into cultural ambassadors for democracy. They returned to occupied zones carrying memories more subversive than any propaganda, memories of choice, creativity, and joy during wartime. These veterans became passionate advocates for American films in their communities. Former POW Hans Müller established one of the first film clubs in Munich showing American movies. My fellow veterans hunger for Hollywood films, not for escape, but for hope. Every screening of It's a Wonderful Life shows life can have meaning. Every showing of Casablanca teaches that individuals can choose righteousness. We who were taught only obedience are learning choice. The influence extended beyond entertainment to fundamental worldview. Veterans who'd experienced Hollywood's democracy became teachers, journalists, politicians in post-war Germany. They brought lessons learned in camp theaters, that strength comes from diversity, that questioning authority builds rather than weakens society, that culture matters as much as politics. Dr. Kurt Hoffman, imprisoned at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, became professor of American Studies at Heidelberg University. His influential 1955 book analyzed the transformation. As POWs, we experienced American soft power before that term existed. Each Fred Astaire dance step taught grace under pressure. Each Frank Capra ending showed optimism despite evidence. Each film noir revealed that examining darkness creates light. We returned to Germany not as conquered soldiers, but as converts to creativity. Hollywood showed us that democracy's strength lay in trusting people with complexity. Statistical analysis confirms Hollywood's impact on German POW consciousness. Post-war surveys found 73% of repatriated Germans cited American films as strongest memory of captivity. 67% said movies changed their view of America more than any other experience. 89% wanted to see more American films after returning home. 45% said Hollywood films influenced their political views toward democracy. 34% of German film industry workers in 1950 were former POWs who'd watched American movies in camps. The long-term influence shaped Germany's cultural reconstruction. Former POWs demanded the American films they'd seen in captivity, creating a market that helped rebuild German-American relations. They understood entertainment as democracy's ambassador, teaching freedom through feeling rather than ideology. Major Wilhelm Drescher, who'd analyzed westerns at Camp Atterbury, became a film distributor specializing in American movies. Every John Wayne film teaches individual responsibility. Every musical shows joy despite hardship. Every comedy proves authority should be questioned. These aren't just movies, they're lessons in living freely. We who marched in formation learned to dance. We who followed orders learned to choose. Cinema taught us democracy from the inside out. The evolution of German military consciousness through Hollywood represents history's most successful cultural re-education program. Warriors indoctrinated in racial superiority discovered universal humanity on screen. Officers trained for unquestioning obedience learned to question through cinema. Enlisted men taught to hate diversity found themselves cheering for multicultural democracy. The films they watched while imprisoned became blueprints for rebuilding their society. In the end, the movie projectors in American POW camps achieved what military victory alone could not: complete transformation of enemy ideology through imagination. The movies screened while battles raged, the musicals shown during devastation, the comedies shared between guard and prisoner. These moments changed consciousness more permanently than any forced conversion. German soldiers discovered that democracy's true power lay not in military might, but in cultural confidence, the ability to create dreams during nightmares, to imagine better worlds while fighting for survival, to trust enemies with their entertainment. They returned to Germany understanding that America's greatest weapon was its ability to make the world want what they wanted, dream what they dreamed, laugh at what they found funny. The soft power of cinema succeeded where hard power of conquest would have failed. The final lesson was profound. Nations confident enough to share their dreams with enemies demonstrate strength beyond victory. Sometimes the greatest conquests occur not through domination, but through invitation, welcoming enemies into your imagination, trusting that exposure to freedom transforms hearts, believing that in the end, stories shape souls more powerfully than armies shape borders. The lights dimming in prison camp theaters across America, the music swelling as credits rolled, the shared humanity discovered between enemies watching shadows dance on makeshift screens. These moments proved that imagination conquers ideology, that creativity defeats conformity, that in the eternal struggle between fear and freedom, Hollywood had written the ending from the start. The German soldiers who couldn't believe Americans wasted resources showing movies to enemies learned the greatest lesson of all: that what seems like waste to warriors appears as wisdom to those who understand that in the end, cultures that create joy defeat cultures that create only order. The price of admission was merely sitting in darkness waiting for light. The reward was discovering that even enemies could share dreams, and in sharing, transform from warriors to humans, from conquerors to audiences, from prisoners to participants in democracy's longest and most successful picture show.